Gran Turismo is the one that I went and saw yesterday. I know you saw it a couple
Yeah,
of
I
weeks
saw
ago.
last week.
So what? Just kind of remind us of what you thought about it, and then I'll kind of give my review on what I thought about the movie.
Obviously, so Orlando Bloom was my least favorite part about that movie. As I said last week, which is so sad for me because I was a big Orlando Bloom fan growing up. But the rest of the movie I thought was really phenomenal. I thought it was really great. I think the graphics are really cool. I love the actors. David Harbour obviously is really incredible. David Harbour, you stick him in anything and I will go see it because he's
got the charisma.
So gravitating. Like, he's such a good actor. He has so many moments, so many beats that are just so brilliant in this movie. And I even kind of like the what is his name? Johan, the actor.
Oh, Archie Madekwe, who played the lead.
Oh, is he playing
right?
Johan something?
No. The character name was Jan Martin.
There we go. Martin Burrow. We did this last week too. Sorry, guys. I didn't look at the notes. I think he did a really great job. And I think it's a really great story. It's really incredible. It's got some really incredible moments. And obviously, it's all based on a true story. And from everything I read, they did a really good job of sticking to that.
And the real Jan Mardenborough played basically the stunt double for his own character in the movie, which is fantastic because he's still racing in real life. Mm-hmm. I have followed this story, the real life story, since it was going on back 5-6 years ago. And I used to be at ESPN at the time, and they would run video packages covering this, incredible underdog story of somebody who used to play this Gran Turismo as a video game, going to GT Academy, and then becoming a real racer and going and racing at tracks like the Nürburgring and Le Mans, which Le Mans is a 24-hour race. You got to have stamina. You're going to do multiple rounds. It's like a team relay kind of a deal. So you swap out drivers. And we last saw Le Mans in our cinema screens at Ford versus Ferrari. And the way they did, it's a different time period. It's more of a historical movie. But they did a really fantastic job with their car racing sequences. But in this movie, I feel like the racing action sequences in Gran Turismo are probably some of the best racing action sequences ever put to film, period. This was definitely the movie that I thought that, Fast and Furious at this point is way past this racing roots. And it was never truly about this kind of racing. It was always about drag racing at best, or just a quarter mile. It wasn't really going around tracks and stuff. Whereas this movie really kind of puts you in the driver's seat, and the way it's shot, the cinematography, it really kind of pulls you into the action, to the point that when the movie ended, I literally, as I see the logo come up at the end before the credits start rolling, I was like, oh my God, it's almost like the video game where you finish a race and you're feeling really good about yourself because you just came in you came in at the podium, and now you're off to the next race because you're playing.
And I think they do those transitions really well too, and they revisit that throughout the whole movie. That sort of premise of this was originally a video game. I think this movie is so beautifully shot. I think they did a great job. I really love this movie. People were cheering. I almost cried at one point. And
did tear up, yeah.
Yeah, but you made an interesting comment before we started the show that you felt like the director didn't hit enough of the emotional beats. I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah, and the reason why I say that, okay, so it may sound a little nitpicky or it may not, but this is what I thought about that part of the movie. Like you said, the action, the cinematography, the visuals of this film are fantastic. And some of the creative use of visual effects with, showing the car and how the main character is thinking about because literally they kind of put you in his mind by showing what he's thinking in his head and how he connects to racing as his philosophy, and how he uses his experience with the game and his real life racing events that he goes to. But I feel like the beginning of the movie was very heavily focused on his character and his family and his environment that he's growing up in, and they set up a lot of really good character motivation through that, and some good family dynamics, whether it was between him and his dad, which I think was the strongest relationship, between him and his mother, and then his to-be girlfriend down the road, and his brother and everything. And those were some of the more poignant moments of the movie. And then once we got into the racing part, it felt like they completely sidelined the family aspect of it up until the big accident. And even then, it was sort of only just creeping back in. And it felt like once David Harbour's character came in, the relationship between him and Archie Madekwe's character was the focal point of the whole movie. And don't get me wrong, David Harbour is the best part of this film. Orlando Bloom was fun to see on screen. His character was kind of like the one that just sort of like, okay, it's so nice you're going to bounce off of, but really David Harbour was the heart of this movie.
Yeah.
However, then for them to kind of come back to the almost abruptly towards like the Le Mans race, and then his Djimon Hounsou does a fantastic job, and that father-son scene is probably the most poignant father-son scene I've seen on camera
But
in a
you know
long, long
what,
time,
Dan?
and I
I
teared up.
think
But it felt uneven. Like those emotional beats kind of felt uneven for me throughout. Like it just when it was a real high, and then like the one element completely disappeared, they replaced it with something else, and then they were like, oh yeah, the family's still here. And I'm just thinking from a real life perspective.
I disagree with you. In a real life perspective, I think it's very, very honest, because as someone who has moved away from my family to chase my dreams, my family is not my focal point. I'm very alone, very much of the time. And I very much am in this on my own with people who help me within the industry. And I think you coming from like more, just from what I know about like your cultural background, you and your family are really close. For a lot of people who do this kind of like, I'm just comparing like the performance aspect. And I think they followed the real life sort of path of the racer. He literally moved away to chase his dreams against his family's wishes. He very much isolated himself, whether that was his choice or not, in order to do something that he wanted to do. And I very much feel like that sort of, those relationships are very realistic, because sometimes when you're doing all of this crazy stuff out in the world, it doesn't, your family is not the focal point anymore. And I feel like that's a story that's not told as often, because maybe it makes him seem a little more heartless, but I feel like it's very realistic.
I do agree with your take on that, in the sense that maybe that's what they were going for, most likely. And in that sense, it was grounded and realistic and different. But from just like a storytelling perspective, I felt like the emotional elements of it felt a bit uneven at times, because just from just like a screenwriting perspective and those kind of things, it just felt like the emotional, what they were setting up in the beginning, then they just kind of put it on the back burner until they did what felt like an abrupt payoff. And then I just felt like a different director might have married those two sides of the equation more poetically. And I realized that might be taking stuff that didn't actually happen and maybe like kind of Hollywoodizing it a little bit.
But
However,
I prefer
hear
a
me
real
out.
take on it than a Hollywood take on it.
But think about it this way. And look, I'm not saying that you're wrong in what you're saying. I'm just saying, look in terms of my perspective here is, you look at the Apollo 13 movie, and Tom Hanks like famous line, Houston, we have a problem. In real life, nobody ever said, Houston, we have a problem. It was some variation of that, but that's not the line that they said in real life when, Apollo 13 was in a lot of trouble. And then there's a lot of other elements of that movie which were either modified or sort of exaggerated in certain ways by Ron Howard to tell a more emotionally like engaging story that, as a movie functions better than maybe if they just did word for word what happened in real life. And I think like throughout history, we have seen, like even in Oppenheimer, which is a very recent example, I bet you didn't adapt every aspect of how things went down, including like that whole trial for Oppenheimer where, his wife is defending him, or when he's there trying to defend his affair, or talking about his affair while his wife is sitting behind him. Those kind of moments, I bet you, like Christopher Nolan is known for like taking those elements and then for emotional beats purposes and just for more effective writing. And just because it happened in real life a certain way doesn't mean it's going to play well on camera. And then ultimately the way I would look at it as a filmmaker is, if you're not watching a documentary, then you have some creative license to kind of play with those elements to the advantage of the movie itself, to tell a better story. And that's where I just felt like this movie was a little cold for me at times. I'm not saying it was a bad movie.
Well, no,
I had a lot of fun with it.
Even in what you're saying, Dan, I disagree, because it's like we constantly ask for people to do something different. And you right now are asking him to do something that everybody else is doing. So it's like in that aspect too, I'm like, I feel like they hit it enough. I'm sure it was still Hollywoodized in a lot of different ways without having a
Or by the way,
documentary.
when he's like, you have to make observations of the racetrack from a chopper, and he's like, I would never do that in real life. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And then later on, throughout like the racing sequences, there's clearly that the helicopter shot of
Mhm.
just roving over the tracks as they're racing. So they did do some of that. So yeah, I'll give them
So
props
it's
for that.
just like on this one, I think we have to agree to disagree. I just feel like, I'm sure they had to change a lot of things. I don't, there was nothing in this that I was like, wow, I really wish I would have seen more of his family. No, I don't care about his family. I care about what he's doing for this race.
Yeah, you're right. But like, I'm not saying like, and
Yeah.
let's agree to disagree on that. But like, I'm not coming at it from the standpoint of, well, I wanted to see more family in it, kind of a thing. Like, it wasn't that kind of movie. If I wanted to see more of that, I can go watch Blue Beetle again, which was
Yeah.
like, that was the whole part. The whole movie was all about family. But in this one, I just felt like because the expectation was set that his family is a big part of his life, or like, it's the first 15, 20 minutes of the movie is all about like what his current situation looks like. I just felt like then for them to completely like disappear, like really after that initial sequence, I think the first time we saw his mom and dad was when like he was doing his like second or third big race, and
Yeah.
then you see them watching him it was the one where he gets
Right
into the
before
huge
the
accident.
accident. Yeah.
So it felt almost like, oh wait, why? Because in hindsight now I'm thinking, oh, so they showed his family there because then he could show the reaction by the family, but didn't matter because I bet you his family was cheering him on for every other race before
I
that.
don't think they
Yeah,
were because
but like
because
watching him on
they set up the
TV, right?
expectation too when he called and said, "Hey, I won." His mom was like, "Oh, that's great," and his dad was like
No,
at the
but there was
soccer game.
then a bunch of other races that he was, he came in before he got his license,
There were
and those
only two
races.
or three others.
So I
And he
no, there
was
was
like
because
not
remember it
picking
took
up
him
the
six.
phone. They were calling and stuff like that. Like, I feel like they weren't talking.
That's the way it came off.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if that's, I don't know. Okay, well, I just felt like that's one of those things with Neil Blomkamp movies in general, though, that I've noticed that his emotional beats tend to be a little uneven with
Yeah.
his work, whether it's Chappie. District 9 did not need a lot of that. It worked just because the story in general this premise was so strong, and the story structure really did a lot of the work for you. Whereas everything that he's done since District 9, whether it's Elysium, which also very strong emotional grounding to begin with, but then once the movie really picks up and the action beats start hitting, you sort of lose that in favor of just here's a fight sequence, this is a mission,
Yeah.
blah 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 blah,
I've never
and
seen
then we
District
finally
9.
get in a return to the emotional beat towards the end. So I just feel like as a filmmaker, he still hasn't quite mastered like balancing out everything throughout the
That
whole
makes
narrative.
sense. Yeah.
And in this movie, like it's not like the emotional beats weren't there. I just felt like, to be quite frank, if there was a lesser actor than David Harbour in his role in this movie, I think like all the emotional beats we did get throughout the second act wouldn't have been as good because David Harbour really like carried his role and did I think a lot more with his
I
lines
think
and
David
everything
Harbour
than
carried
a
this
lesser actor would
movie
have. Yeah,
1000%.
because the
I
main lead
agree
is
with you
not
there.
that
Yeah.
charismatic.
Yeah.
Although maybe he's playing the character that's not that charismatic, but he just didn't give off those vibes. Also, like when they set up the whole, oh, he's not media ready whatsoever, and then it was meant to be, they played it off like a few times to the point where it seemed like at one point he was almost not chosen for that reason.
Yeah.
And then it became like a non-issue like that, and it was never addressed. I was like, I thought that was going to be a bigger problem, and then it wasn't. Like, and it just became like, oh, like he's got no more questions, please. And then one other time, and they just forgot about it from then on. So, like, that's where I mean, like, there was some inconsistencies, like with the way the writing of this movie is. But when you put that to the side and you look at the action, you look at the general story, you look at the character work for David Harbour's character, that scene with his dad where they're crying and he's like, "I'm here to support you, son," and then everything that happens in the third act and the triumphant moment at the end. Yeah, I mean, if the movie leaves you wanting more at the end, and that's more than what most people would be able to say about their work, and I think that's the best thing you can ask for from an audience is that they want more of your movie when the credits roll. So,
well, also this
in
is
the end, it's a win.
his first movie in quite a while. If you guys go see Gran Turismo, let us know what you think. I mean, remember to like, share, subscribe, comment. Have you seen Gran Turismo, or are you still watching Barbie? What's going on out there?